I just received the confirmation for the biggest award of my life, but my family treated it like a cheap joke. My sister texted that it was a stupid award and they were going to dinner. While my dad simply liked her message, they had no idea their chosen restaurant was broadcasting the ceremony live. When my name appeared on screen alongside a secret they thought was buried, the glass of wine in my sister's hand finally stopped moving. My name is Savannah Phillips, and I am 32 years old. I was sitting in the quiet, climate-controlled hum of the Northline Studio Collective office in Denver when the notification pinged. It was not a particularly loud sound, just a standard digital chirp that usually signaled a calendar reminder or a spam email about refinancing a car I did not own. But this specific ping felt different. It felt heavy. I stared at the screen. The subject line was bold and simple, yet it made the air in my lungs freeze. National Design Council, Rising Vision Designer Award, winner, notification. My hand shook as I clicked the mouse. I am a professional. I manage million-dollar budgets and negotiate with contractors who chew tobacco and spit on my boots. I have stared down city council members regarding zoning laws for historical preservation sites. I do not get rattled. But right then, sitting in my ergonomic chair under the soft glow of the track lighting, I was rattling. I read the first paragraph 3 times. I had won. It was not a nomination. It was not a shortlist notification. I had actually won the Rising Vision Designer Award for the community library project I had bled over for the last 18 months. This was the sort of recognition that changed careers. It was the kind of thing that put your name on the door instead of just on the payroll. The email mentioned a live ceremony. It was happening tonight in Chicago, broadcast nationally on the Lifestyle Network. They wanted me to accept via video link if I could not make the flight in time, but I had already booked a tentative ticket just in case. I was going to be on television. My work was going to be on television. For a solid 10 seconds, I felt a pure, unadulterated rush of joy. It was a warm, golden feeling that started in my chest and spread to my fingertips. Then, inevitably, the reflex kicked in. The conditioned response that I had been trying to therapize out of my system for a decade. I wanted to tell them. I picked up my phone. The screen was cracked slightly in the corner. A spiderweb fracture I kept forgetting to fix. I opened the group chat. It was named The Phillips Nest, a title my mother had chosen 6 years ago. It consisted of 4 people: my mother, Lynn, my father, Mark, my sister, Sabrina, and me. I typed out the message carefully. I did not want to sound desperate, even though I was. I backspaced 3 times. I wanted to sound casual, like this was just another Tuesday, but I also wanted them to understand the magnitude of this. This was not a participation trophy. Hey everyone, I typed. I just got the official news. I won the Rising Vision Award. The ceremony is being broadcast live tonight on the Lifestyle Network at 8 o'clock Eastern Time. They are doing a feature on the library project. It would mean a lot if you could tune in. Here's the link. I hit send. The timestamp read 5:14 in the afternoon, Denver time. That meant it was 7:14 back home in Charlotte, North Carolina. They were awake. They were likely together. I set the phone down on my desk. Face up. I told myself I would not stare at it. I turned back to my monitor and tried to focus on the elevation renderings for the new mid-century modern retrofit we were pitching next week. I moved a window 2 inches to the left. I moved it back. I looked at the phone. Seen by Mom. Seen by Sabrina. Nothing. The silence in a digital chat room is a physical thing. It has weight and texture. It feels like walking into a room where everyone stops talking the moment you enter. I watched the little gray text that indicated they had read the message. They were holding my news in their hands. They were looking at the culmination of 7 years of architectural school, internship grinding, and 80-hour work weeks. 3 minutes passed. Then, 3 dancing dots appeared. Sabrina was typing. My heart hammered against my ribs. Maybe this time was different. Maybe, because this was national news. Because this was undeniable proof of competence. Sabrina would finally yield. Maybe she would say congratulations. Maybe she would say she was proud. The message popped up. Stupid award. My stomach dropped so fast I felt dizzy. 2 words. She had not even capitalized the second one. Before I could process the cruelty of it, a second message from Sabrina followed immediately. "We are going to dinner. We booked this table 3 weeks ago." I stared at the glowing blue bubbles. Stupid award. It was so childish, so bluntly dismissive, that it was almost impressive. She did not ask what the award was for. She did not ask about the ceremony. She simply labeled it stupid and pivoted the conversation back to their schedule. Then came the reaction. A little thumbs-up icon appeared next to Sabrina's message. It was from my father. He had not typed a word. He had not acknowledged my message. He had simply validated hers. He had co-signed the dismissal. My mother chimed in a moment later. "Don't be mad. Savannah, I promised Sabrina we would do a big family dinner tonight. We can't cancel now. Have fun with your thing." My thing. The national award was my thing. A hobby. A distraction. Something that was interfering with their dinner plans. I sat there in the darkening office, the blue light of the monitors casting long, cold shadows across the floor. I felt small. I felt like I was 12 years old again. Sitting at the kitchen table with a report card full of straight A's, waiting for someone to look up from Sabrina's drama club photos. I picked up the phone to type a response. The old Savannah, the one who lived in the shadow of the Phillips family dynamic, would have apologized. She would have said, "No problem. I understand. Enjoy dinner." She would have tried to smooth over the edges, to make herself smaller so she did not take up any emotional space. I looked at my thumbs hovering over the glass keyboard. My knuckles were white. "Have a nice dinner," I typed. I stared at the words. They were polite. They were safe. But as I hit send, I felt something inside my chest make a distinct, audible snapping sound. It was not a heartbreaking. It was something harder, something structural. It was the sound of a bridge collapsing. I was done. I was 32 years old. I was a rising star in American architecture. I had just won an accolade that people in my industry killed for, and I was sitting here sweating over a text message from a 37-year-old woman who still treated life like a high school popularity contest. I locked my phone and tossed it into my bag. I needed to get ready. I had a flight to catch. Virtually speaking, I had a stylist friend coming over in 40 minutes to help me with my hair and makeup for the broadcast. I had a speech to memorize, but the itch remained. It was a compulsion. 20 minutes later, while I was gathering my sketches to take home, I checked Instagram. There it was. The story circle around Sabrina's profile picture was glowing pink and orange. I tapped it. The video opened with a jarring burst of noise. It was the ambient chatter of a high-end restaurant, overlaid with a trending pop song. The camera panned around a table set with white linen and crystal wine glasses. "Family night," the caption read, with a sparkle emoji. The camera landed on my mother, who was waving a menu and laughing. Then it panned to my father, who was pouring wine from a decanter. He looked happy, relaxed. He did not look like a man who had a daughter receiving a national honor tonight. He looked like a man who was exactly where he wanted to be. Then the camera flipped to selfie mode. Sabrina winked at the lens. She was wearing a silver dress that caught the light, her makeup flawless, her smile practiced and predatory. She tagged the location. Carmine and Ash. I froze. Carmine and Ash was in Charlotte. It was one of those places that prided itself on exclusivity. It was dark, moody, and expensive. It was the kind of place Sabrina loved because being there was a status symbol in itself. But I knew something about Carmine and Ash that Sabrina, in her infinite self-absorption, evidently did not. I had done a remote consultation for that restaurant group 2 years ago. I knew the layout. I knew the interior design specifications. I knew that the owners were obsessed with creating a dynamic visual atmosphere, specifically. I knew that Carmine and Ash had just installed a series of large-format, high-definition screens integrated into the mirror paneling of the main dining room wall. They were designed to blend in when off, but when on, they dominated the visual field of every table in the VIP section, and the owners had a standing policy to tune into major cultural broadcasts to create ambiance. I checked the Lifestyle Network schedule on my laptop. 8 p.m. Eastern. The Rising Vision Awards. Live from Chicago. I looked back at the screenshot of Sabrina's story. Based on the angle of the lighting and the position of the wine rack in the background, they were seated at table 14. Table 14 was directly facing the main media wall. A strange, cold sensation washed over me. It was not anger anymore. It was clarity. I looked at the photo of myself that I kept tacked to the corkboard above my desk. It was an old Polaroid, taken when I was 9. I was standing in the kitchen of our old house in Charlotte. I was wearing an oversized t-shirt, standing next to the stove, stirring a pot of sauce because Mom was busy fixing Sabrina's hair for a pageant. I was blurry in the photo. Sabrina, who had walked into the frame at the last second, was in sharp focus, beaming, blocking half of my body. That was the story of my life. I was the background noise. I was the blurry figure by the stove. I was the one who kept the sauce from burning while everyone else admired the star. They only saw me when I was useful. They only acknowledged me when I fit into the narrative they had constructed. The narrative where Sabrina was the sun and the rest of us were just planets lucky enough to orbit her warmth. They called my award stupid because they could not understand a victory that did not involve them. They dismissed it because if I was successful, if I was truly exceptional, then the hierarchy of the Phillips family would be disrupted. Sabrina could not be the golden child if the scapegoat started wearing a crown. I stood up and put on my coat. The air in the office felt different now. It was sharper, cleaner. "Stupid award," I whispered to the empty room. I grabbed my bag. They were going to be sitting at table 14. They were going to be drinking expensive Pinot Noir and laughing about how dramatic I was. They were going to be eating steak tartare and toasting to Sabrina's latest vague achievement. And directly in front of them, 5 feet high and 10 feet wide, the Lifestyle Network was going to start its broadcast. They had no idea. They thought they could hit "seen" and make me disappear. They thought they could dismiss my life's work with a text message and a dinner reservation. I walked to the elevator and pressed the down button. The metal doors slid open with a smooth hiss. I stepped inside and watched my reflection in the polished steel. I did not look like the blurry girl by the stove anymore. I looked like someone who was about to burn the house down, not with fire, but with the truth. Tonight, they were not going to have a choice. Tonight, they could not scroll past. Tonight, they could not change the channel. Tonight, they will see. To understand why a text message about dinner felt like a structural failure in the foundation of my life. You have to understand the house in Charlotte. It was a beautiful house on the outside, a colonial revival with symmetrical windows and manicured boxwoods that my father paid a landscaping crew $200 a month to maintain. But inside, the air pressure was never stable. It shifted entirely based on the barometric readings of my sister, Sabrina. Sabrina is 5 years older than me. In any other family, that gap might have meant she was a protector or a guide. In the Phillips household, it meant she was the incumbent ruler, and I was the permanent subject. From the time I was old enough to form memories, Sabrina was the star. She was not just loud, she was performative. She had a way of entering a room that demanded everyone stop what they were doing and look at her. If she had a good day at school, the whole house vibrated with pop music and laughter. If she had a bad day, the house went silent, walking on eggshells, lights dimmed, voices hushed so as not to disturb her delicate process of grieving a C- on a history test or a rejection from the cheerleading squad. My parents, Mark and Lynn, called it confidence. They said Sabrina had a fire in her belly. They said she was destined for big things because she felt things so deeply. They did not see that they were feeding a fire that was slowly consuming all the oxygen in the house. I was different. I was the quiet one. I was the one who could occupy herself for hours in the corner of the dining room with a stack of printer paper and a box of markers. I did not need an audience. In fact, I preferred not to have one. An audience meant judgment. An audience meant I was competing with Sabrina. And that was a game I had been rigged to lose before I was born. I found my sanctuary in structure. While Sabrina was in the living room practicing monologues for drama club, or crying about how a boy named Jason looked at her the wrong way in the cafeteria. I was in my bedroom, building. I became obsessed with cardboard. We always had boxes lying around from my mother's online shopping habit, and I would drag them into my room, cutting them apart with a pair of safety scissors until I was old enough to be trusted with an X-Acto knife. I built houses. I built skyscrapers. I built entire city blocks on the floor of my closet. I was fascinated by how things stood up. I would spend hours watching videos on the family computer about load-bearing walls and cantilevered beams. I learned about light. I learned that if you cut a window just right, the sun hits the floor in a perfect rectangle at 4 in the afternoon. I learned that space could control how you feel. My parents viewed this as a quaint, slightly worrisome habit. They called it being overly careful. They called it being hard to market. "You are so serious, Savannah," my mother would say, leaning in the doorway while I glued a tiny balsa wood staircase together. "Why don't you go downstairs? Sabrina is teaching us the dance routine for the pep rally. It is hilarious." "I am busy," I would say. "Suit yourself," she would reply, the disappointment evident in the slope of her shoulders. "We just worry you are going to be lonely." They did not understand that I was not lonely. I was safe. In my miniature worlds, the walls were solid, the roofs did not leak, and nobody came in and screamed because they did not like the way their hair looked that day. The contrast in how our achievements were handled was so sharp it could cut glass. I remember one Tuesday when I was 16. I had entered a statewide youth design competition. The prompt was to reimagine a public park. I had spent 3 months on my submission. I drew the plans by hand because I did not have the software. I built a scale model out of recycled foam board and moss. I scraped off the oak tree in the backyard. I won first place. I came home from school with the certificate and a check for $500. I was vibrating. It was the first time an external authority had told me that my way of seeing the world had value. I walked into the kitchen, chest swelling, ready to show them. "Mom, Dad," I said. "Look." My mother was at the stove, stirring pasta. My father was at the table, looking through a stack of bills. They looked up. I held out the certificate. "I won," I said. "The design competition? I got first place in the state." My mother wiped her hands on a towel and took the paper. She scanned it. "Oh, wow, rising talent. That is nice, honey, really nice." $500, I added, trying to anchor the achievement in something they understood. "That is great for your savings account," my father said, nodding absently. "Good job, kiddo." It was a total of 30 seconds of attention. Then the front door slammed open. Sabrina walked in. She was 21 at the time, living at home, in between opportunities, which was a phrase we used a lot. She was wearing sunglasses indoors. She dropped her bag on the floor with a heavy thud. "I cannot believe it," she announced, her voice trembling with tragic resonance. My mother immediately abandoned the pasta. My father put down the bills. The certificate in my mother's hand was placed on the counter, right next to a pile of junk mail, and forgotten. "What is it, Bean?" My mother used her childhood nickname. "What happened?" "The agency," Sabrina said, taking off her sunglasses to reveal perfectly dry eyes. "They said my look is too commercial for the high-fashion catalog. They want me to do the hand modeling gig instead. Hands, like I am just a body part." The kitchen transformed into a crisis center. My father got up to pour her a glass of wine. My mother ushered her to a chair, rubbing her back. "They are blind," my mother soothed. "You are beautiful. You are a star. We will find another agency. Better yet, we will get new headshots. Maybe the lighting was wrong on the last ones." I stood there, next to the refrigerator, watching them. My first place certificate was already curling slightly in the humidity of the kitchen. I looked at the check for $500 in my hand. It was enough to buy the professional drafting software I wanted. It was real money. It was earned. But it did not matter. Sabrina's rejection was the headline. My victory was the classified ad that nobody read. What are we going to do for dinner? Sabrina sniffed, looking up at my mother with wide, pleading eyes. I cannot eat this pasta. I feel bloated. I need something that makes me feel better. We can go out, my father said immediately. Let's go to the Italian place uptown, the one you like with the patio. Okay, Sabrina said, offering a brave, fragile smile. Thanks, Daddy. My mother turned to me. Savannah, go get changed. We are going out to cheer your sister up. I have homework, I said. It was a lie. I just could not bear to sit at a table and watch them rebuild Sabrina's ego brick by brick, while my own accomplishment sat collecting dust on the counter. Don't be difficult, my mother sighed. It is family time. That was the rule. Family time meant Sabrina time. As I grew older, the dynamic shifted from emotional to financial. Sabrina's career was a nebulous cloud of PR, event coordination, and lifestyle consulting. In reality, she was a professional social climber. She needed money to maintain the image of someone who had money. She needed outfits for galas she was not invited to but crashed anyway. She needed to pick up checks at lunch to impress people who might be useful to her. My father, a man who checked the odometer on his car to calculate gas mileage down to the cent, opened his wallet for her without hesitation. He called it an investment. You have to spend money to make money, he would quote, repeating a line he had likely heard in a movie. Sabrina is building a brand. Once she lands a big client, it will all pay off. But when I told him I wanted to apply to architecture school, his face went flat. Design, he said, chewing on the word like it was gristle. That is a long road. Savannah, architects do not make money until they are 40, and that is if they are lucky. It is a lot of drawing and not a lot of business. Why don't you look at business administration? Or real estate? You could sell the houses instead of drawing them. I do not want to sell houses, I said. I want to make them exist. Design is nice, he said, waving his hand. But you have to do something that pays the bills. The hypocrisy burned me, but it also fueled me. I stopped asking them for things. I started working. I took freelance jobs on the internet, designing logos for $5 a pop. I did technical drawings for a local contractor who needed cheap labor. I saved every penny. I bought my own laptop. I paid for my own application fees. When I got the acceptance letter from the university in Colorado, along with a partial scholarship, I did not organize a family meeting. I did not wait for the right time to announce it at dinner. I simply signed the paperwork and mailed it back. I told them 3 weeks before I was set to leave. Colorado? My mother said, looking at me as if I had said I was moving to Mars. That is so far away. Who do we know in Colorado? Nobody, I said. That is the point. But what about the family? She asked. Sabrina is launching her jewelry pop-up next month. She is going to need help setting up the booth. I will not be here, I said. The day I left, the air in the house felt heavy, as if the vacuum-sealed environment was trying to suck me back in. My father drove me to the airport. He did not offer to pay for my dorm room or my books. He had just spent $4,000 on a branding retreat for Sabrina in Sedona. So things were a little tight right now. Work hard, he told me at the departure curb. Don't forget where you came from. I looked at him, standing there in his polo shirt, checking his watch, because he needed to get back to take Sabrina to a lunch meeting. I won't, I said, and I meant it. I would never forget. I would never forget that in the Phillips economy, I was the raw material, and Sabrina was the product. I would never forget that my stability was taken for granted, so that her instability could be subsidized. Getting on that plane felt like surfacing from deep water. My ears popped, the pressure released, for the first time in 18 years. I was not Savannah the little sister. I was not Savannah the background character. I was just Savannah. I spent the next decade proving that he was wrong about the money and she was wrong about the attention. I worked harder than anyone else in my program. I took the shifts nobody wanted. I learned the codes, the zoning laws, the unglamorous guts of the industry. I built a reputation on reliability. not Flash. But the trauma of that house in Charlotte did not stay in Charlotte. It followed me. It lived in the way I over-explained my decisions. It lived in the way I apologized for taking up space in a meeting room. It lived in the way I hesitated before hitting send on an email announcing my success, terrified that someone would reply and tell me it was stupid. So when I sat in my office in Denver and read that text message, "Stupid award," it was not a new wound. It was the same wound, reopened for the 1,000th time. But this time, the context had changed. I was not the teenager standing in the kitchen holding a $500 check. I was a grown woman with a national accolade and a bank account I had filled myself. They thought I was still the girl who would stand by the stove and stir the sauce. They thought I would swallow the insult and like the Instagram post. They thought I was still part of their cast. But I had written my own script now, and tonight, for the first time in history, the Phillips family was going to have to watch a show where Sabrina was not the star. Tonight, they were going to learn that you cannot starve someone of recognition for 30 years and then expect them to stay silent when the world finally hands them a microphone. The mountains in Denver are different from the gentle, rolling Appalachians back home. They are jagged, imposing, and indifferent. They do not care if you look at them. They just exist, massive and undeniable. That was the energy I tried to channel when I started at Northline Studio Collective. I arrived in Colorado with 2 suitcases, a refurbished laptop, and a desperate need to be defined by something other than my sister's moods. Northline was not a glamorous boutique firm where people drank espresso and discussed theory all day. It was a production house. It was a grinder. We handled everything from municipal retrofits to high-density housing, and the pace was blistering. I started at the bottom. In the architectural world, the bottom does not mean fetching coffee, though I did plenty of that too. It means redlining. It means staring at a CAD file for 9 hours straight, hunting for layer inconsistencies. It means driving to a construction site in the middle of a snowstorm to measure the clearance of a doorway, because the contractor thinks the blueprints are wrong. I loved it. I loved the anonymity of the labor. When I was fixing a rendering at 2 a.m, nobody cared about my personality. Nobody cared if I was fun or sparkly like Sabrina. They only cared if the measurements were accurate. For the first time in my life, my value was objective. It was mathematical. If the wall stood up, I was good. If the budget balanced, I was valuable. My desk was in the back corner, buried under stacks of material samples, squares of quartz, strips of laminate, heavy bricks of limestone. I built a fortress out of them. I worked quietly, head down, headphones on, churning out work at a pace that made the other juniors nervous. It took 6 months for Renee Hart to notice me. Renee was the senior creative director. She was a woman made of sharp angles and terrifying competence. She wore monochromatic suits and spoke in bullet points. She did not give compliments. She gave instructions. One afternoon, during a design charrette for a mixed-use lobby, the team was arguing about how to handle a problematic structural column that was blocking the flow of the room. The lead architect wanted to clad it in mirrors to make it disappear. The client wanted to paint it bright red as a statement. I was sitting in the back, sketching on my notepad. I had an idea. But the old reflex, the Charlotte reflex, kept my mouth shut. Don't interrupt the stars. Don't ruin the performance. Renee stopped the meeting. She turned her chair slowly and looked directly at me. "Phillips," she said. Her voice cut through the room like a laser. "You are making a face." I froze. "I am sorry, Renee. I do not care if you are sorry," she said. "I care about why you look like you just smelled sour milk. You disagree with the mirror idea. Why?" My throat went dry. Every eye in the room was on me. This was the moment I usually shrank. This was the moment I usually deferred to Sabrina. But Sabrina was 1,500 miles away. "The mirrors will reflect the glare from the south-facing windows," I said, my voice shaky, but gaining traction. "It will blind anyone walking in between 10 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon, and the red paint will clash with the terrazzo floor we already ordered." "So?" Renee asked. "What is the fix?" I stood up and walked to the whiteboard. My hands were trembling, but I picked up the marker. We do not hide it. We expand it. We wrap the column in acoustic wood slats and build a circular bench around the base. It turns the obstacle into a waiting area. It activates the dead space. Silence. I capped the marker and looked at the floor, waiting for the dismissal. Waiting for someone to tell me it was stupid. Do it, Renee said. She stood up and gathered her files. Draft the specs by tomorrow morning. As she walked past me, she paused. She did not smile. She leaned in close, so only I could hear. You have the eye. Savannah, stop asking for permission to use it. Nobody here is going to hand you a microphone. You have to take it. That was the permission slip I had been waiting 30 years to sign. 2 years later, the Project Lantern brief landed on my desk. It was a nightmare project. The city had acquired a derelict warehouse in a neighborhood that was historically underserved, a mix of immigrant families, aging veterans, and low-income workers. They wanted to turn it into a community library and workspace. The budget was laughable. The timeline was impossible. The building itself was a hazard. It smelled of mildew and decades of neglect. None of the senior architects wanted to touch it. There was no glory in it. There was no money in it. It was a pro bono headache that the firm had taken on for tax purposes. I will take it, I told Renee. She looked at me over her glasses. It is a career graveyard. Savannah, you will be fighting for every penny. You will be managing contractors who work for minimum wage. You will not get a glossy magazine spread out of this. I do not want a magazine spread, I said. I want to fix it. I disappeared into that project. For 8 months, I practically lived in that warehouse. I stopped being just a designer. I became a scavenger, because the budget was so tight. I could not order new custom fixtures. I had to improvise. I went to salvage yards. I found old industrial lighting cages that were covered in rust. I spent my weekends sandblasting them in my garage until they revealed a beautiful, raw steel finish. I found a gymnasium floor being ripped out of a local high school and negotiated to buy the maple planks for pennies on the dollar to clad the walls. I designed the space not for accolades, but for the people who would use it. I lowered the sightlines for the children's area so the immigrant mothers could see their kids from the computer stations while they applied for jobs. I created quiet pods with heavy soundproofing for the veterans who needed a space to decompress without sensory overload. I designed a communal kitchen because I knew that in this neighborhood, food was the language that connected people. One night, exhausted and covered in drywall dust, I decided to film the process. I set up my phone on a ladder. I did not put on makeup. I did not fix my messy bun. I just hit record and started talking about the light. We cannot afford expensive chandeliers, I told the camera, holding up a piece of translucent polycarbonate sheeting. So we are going to use this industrial roofing material. We are going to layer it over standard LED strips. It diffuses the harshness. It creates a soft, glowing lantern effect. It makes the space feel expensive, even though this plastic costs $12 a sheet. Dignity does not have to be expensive. It just has to be thoughtful. I posted the video to a small Instagram account I used to track my portfolio. I had maybe 200 followers, mostly college friends and bot accounts. I went to sleep. When I woke up, my phone was hot. The video had been shared by a design blog, then by a DIY influencer, then by a major architectural aggregate. It had 400,000 views. People were not commenting on my looks. They were not commenting on my outfit. They were commenting on the idea. Dignity doesn't have to be expensive. That line was being quoted over and over. I posted more. I showed how we restored the original brick. I showed the volunteers coming in to paint. I told the stories of the people in the neighborhood who brought us tamales and coffee because they were so excited to have a place of their own. By the time the library opened, I had a following, not a huge one, maybe 50,000 people, but they were engaged. They were real. The Denver Post sent a reporter. They ran a Sunday feature, The Architect of Empathy, How Savannah Phillips Turned a Ruin into a Refuge. A month later, Dwell magazine, the holy grail of modern design, featured the project on their digital front page. I held the tablet in my hands, staring at the headline, my name, my work, no filter, no family connections, just me. The old instinct kicked in. The desire to share, the hope that maybe, just maybe, this was big enough to break through the wall. I copied the link to the Dwell article. I pasted it into the family group chat. Hey, I typed, the library project just got featured in Dwell. It is a national design magazine. I thought you might want to see what I have been working on. I waited. My mother responded first. Cute. 4 letters. No exclamation point for the achievement. Just for the tone. Cute. As if I had knitted a coaster or baked a decent batch of cookies. As if I hadn't just been recognized by one of the most prestigious publications in my industry. Then she immediately followed up. Sabrina, did you decide on the dress for the gala this weekend? I think the blue one pops more. My chest tightened. It was a physical pain. A sharp squeeze right behind the sternum. Then Sabrina chimed in. Yeah, going with the blue. Congrats, Sav. But do people actually care about that stuff? It is basically charity work, right? I mean, it is nice of you. But does it pay? I stared at the screen. Does anyone care? 400,000 people cared. The city council cared. The veterans who now had a safe place to read cared. But to Sabrina, if it did not involve a red carpet or a VIP wristband, it did not exist. She was reducing my career, my passion, my art, to charity work, implying it was a hobby for bored housewives, not a professional architectural feat. Design is nice, my father's voice echoed in my head. But you have to do something that pays the bills. I looked at the message again. Cute. I did not reply. I did not type, thanks. I did not try to explain the significance of Dwell magazine. I did not try to justify the budget or the impact. I put the phone down face down on the desk. Phillips, Renee called out from her office. Come look at this. I walked into her office. She was smiling. A rare, terrifying sight. The client for the Downtown Arts District just called, she said. They saw the library video. They saw the article. They want you. Specifically you. Not the firm. You. I looked at Renee. I looked at the drafting table where my cute drawings lay. Okay, I said. Let's get to work. I realized something in that moment. I was never going to get the applause from Charlotte. The currency I was earning. Respect. Impact. Artistic integrity. Had no exchange rate in the Phillips household. They were trading in attention, and I was trading in substance. I stopped sending updates. I stopped fishing for validation. I just worked. I worked through the holidays. I worked through the weekends. I took on harder projects. I refined my voice. I became undeniable to everyone except the 3 people who shared my DNA. And then came the Tuesday in November. It was a gray day. The sky was the color of wet concrete. I was clearing out my inbox, deleting vendor spam, when a new message landed at the top of the stack. From the National Design Council. Subject: Official Nomination. Rising Vision Designer of the Year. I stopped breathing. The National Design Council Award was not a magazine feature. It was the Oscars of my field. It was the award that launched the careers of the architects I studied in school. It was given to one person under the age of 40 in the entire country each year. I opened the email. Dear Ms. Phillips, it is our distinct honor to inform you. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. This was it. This was the summit. This was the thing that would prove, objectively and irrefutably, that I was not just careful or hard to market. I reached for my phone to call someone. My thumb hovered over Mom. I pulled it back. No, not yet. I read the rest of the email. Televised ceremony. Chicago black tie. I sat back in my chair and looked out the window at the jagged mountains. A cold, fierce pride settled in my stomach. I had climbed this mountain alone. I had packed my own gear. I had mapped my own route. But as I looked at the blinking cursor, a darker thought crept in. A thought that tasted like ash. I was going to invite them. I knew I was. Because even after everything, even after the cute and the stupid, a part of me, the 9-year-old girl by the stove, still wanted them to see me. But this time, I wasn't asking for permission. I was issuing a witness summons. I forwarded the email to my personal account. The subject line stared back at me. Bold and black, rising vision designer. My vision was clear now. I just hoped they were ready for what I was about to show them, because unlike the library, I wasn't going to build this moment to be comfortable. I was going to build it to be blinding. Chicago winds have a way of cutting right through you, finding the gaps in your coat and your confidence. I stood in the suite of the hotel, staring at my reflection in a full-length mirror. I was wearing a structural jumpsuit in deep emerald silk, tailored so sharply it looked like it had been carved rather than sewn. It was not a princess dress. It was not something Sabrina would wear. It was serious. It was commanded space. Renee Hart was sitting in the armchair behind me, sipping sparkling water. She was wearing a black tuxedo with satin lapels, looking like a terrifyingly chic bodyguard. "Stop fidgeting," Renee said, not looking up from her phone. "You look like a statue. That is a compliment." "I feel like I'm about to throw up," I admitted. "Good," she said. "Nerves mean you respect the occasion. If you were not nervous, I would be worried you were a sociopath." I smoothed the fabric over my hip. The ceremony was taking place in the grand ballroom downstairs. 2,000 people, industry titans, critics, the kind of people who could end a career with a raised eyebrow. And beyond them, the cameras. The Lifestyle Network was broadcasting live. I picked up my phone. It was 7:30 in the evening. The broadcast started in 30 minutes. I knew I should not do it. I knew, logically, that the well was dry. I knew that looking for water there would only leave me with a mouthful of dust. But the little girl inside me, the one who built cardboard cities in the closet, was screaming for one last look. I opened the group chat. I typed carefully, my thumbs feeling heavy. "Hey everyone, the ceremony is starting in 30 minutes. I know you are at dinner, but if you could just tune in for 10 minutes around 8:15, that is when my category is up. It is a national live stream. Here is the link again." I hit send. I watched the screen. The familiar dread coiled in my stomach. A cold snake waking up. Seen by everyone, they were all looking at their phones, at the same time, which meant they were already seated at the table, probably waiting for appetizers, bored enough to check notifications but apparently too busy to care. A minute passed. Then a photo came through from Sabrina. It was a picture of a menu, a leather-bound, gold-embossed menu from Carmine and Ash. The prices were not listed, which was the restaurant's way of saying if you have to ask, you cannot afford it. Then the text, "We are ordering. Stop spamming us. Savannah. It is just a stupid award." There it was. The words were black and white, pixelated and permanent. Stupid award. She followed it up immediately. "Besides, this dinner is important. Dad invited a very important friend. We need to be focused." I frowned. My father, Mark Phillips, was a mid-level manager at a logistics firm. He had work friends. He had golf buddies. He did not have very important friends who required a strategic family dinner at the most expensive restaurant in Charlotte on a Sunday night. The phrasing was off. It sounded transactional. It sounded like a pitch. "Who is the friend?" I typed. Against my better judgment. "None of your business." Sabrina replied, "Someone who can actually help the family, not just boost their own ego." I stared at the phone. The accusation was so inverted it was almost funny. I was the one about to receive a grant that I planned to reinvest in the firm. Sabrina was the one who needed a 4-figure dinner to feel relevant, but I did not fight back. I did not point out the irony. I just felt a cold, final click in my brain. It was the sound of a lock engaging. "Everything okay?" Renee asked. Her voice was softer than usual. I looked up at her. "They are not watching." Renee set her water down. She stood up and walked over to me. She did not hug me. Renee did not do hugs. She placed her hands on my shoulders and turned me so I was facing the mirror again. "Look at that woman," Renee said, pointing to my reflection. I looked. I saw the emerald silk. I saw the sharp eyeliner. I saw the posture of someone who had built a community library out of rust and determination. That woman built a sanctuary for veterans, Renee said. That woman gave a neighborhood its dignity back. That woman did not need her daddy to buy her a table. That woman earned her seat. She leaned in closer, her eyes locking with mine in the glass. Do not look at them, Savannah. They are in the audience. You are on the stage. If you look down at them, you will trip. Look at the horizon. Look at me. Look at the work. I took a deep breath. The air in the hotel room smelled of expensive linen and hairspray. You are right, I said. I am always right, Renee said, checking her watch. Now, let's go. The producer wants you in the green room in 5 minutes. As we walked down the corridor, the carpet muffling our heels, my phone buzzed again. I pulled it out. It was a notification from Instagram. Sabrina had posted a story. I should have ignored it, but I needed to see the battlefield one last time. I tapped the screen. The video was flashy, edited with a glitter filter. It showed Sabrina spinning in a silver sequined dress that was a little too tight and a little too young for her. She was holding a martini glass. Family night? With the V. IPs, the caption read. Carmine. And Ash Big Things, coming boss, babe. She panned the camera to the table. I saw my mother, laughing too loud, wearing her special occasion pearls. I saw my father, looking nervous, adjusting his tie. And I saw the back of a man's head, the important friend. He was wearing a suit that looked expensive but ill-fitting. He had a thick neck and gray hair. But what caught my eye was not the people. It was the wall behind them. Sabrina had panned quickly, but I saw it. The massive mirror panel screen on the wall of Carmine and Ash. It was currently playing a generic loop of burning logs, ambient fireplace footage, but I knew the schedule, I knew the technology. At 8 o'clock sharp, the restaurant manager, a man named David, who took his dynamic visual atmosphere very seriously, would switch the feed to the Lifestyle Network. He did it every year for the Rising Vision Awards. It was a tradition for the design crowd in Charlotte, and Carmine and Ash catered to that crowd. Sabrina had positioned herself perfectly. She was center stage at her table, but she was sitting with her back to the wall. My parents were facing her, which meant they were facing the screen. If they looked up, even for a second, they would see it. I felt a strange sensation. It wasn't revenge, not yet. It was something cooler. It was the feeling of watching a storm front move in on a picnic where nobody had checked the weather report. Put the phone away, Renee said from the elevator bank. I looked at the screen one last time. Sabrina's smile was frozen in the thumbnail, desperate and bright. She had curated this entire night to ensure she was the focal point. She had dragged our parents to an expensive dinner, invited a stranger to impress, and dismissed my achievement as stupid to keep the spotlight firmly on her sequins. She had set the stage for her own performance. She just didn't realize she was an extra in mine. Goodbye, Sabrina, I whispered. I slid the button on the side of my phone. The screen went black. I did not just put it in my pocket. I opened my clutch, placed the phone inside, and snapped the latch shut. The elevator arrived. The doors opened to the lobby level, and the noise hit us. It was a wall of sound, chatter, music, the clinking of glasses. The air was electric. A production assistant with a headset ran up to us. Ms. Phillips, you are up in the second block. We need you backstage for mic check. Right now. We are ready, Renee said. I walked through the crowd. I saw faces I recognized from magazines. I saw the editor of Architectural Digest. I saw the dean of my old university. They nodded at me. They smiled. They knew who I was. I was not the little sister here. I was not the backup plan. We reached the backstage area. It was dark, illuminated only by blue safety lights and the glowing monitors of the control deck. The stage manager was barking orders into his headset. 30 seconds to air. Cue the intro package. Stand by camera 2. I stood behind the heavy velvet curtain. My heart was beating a slow, steady rhythm now. Thump, thump, thump. Nervous? The stage manager asked, glancing at me. I thought about the table at Carmine and Ash. I thought about my father's nervous tie adjustment. I thought about the important friend. I thought about Sabrina calling my work stupid while she drank a $20 martini paid for by a loan I suspected my father couldn't afford. I looked at the stage manager. "No," I said. "I am ready." "You are on in 10 minutes," he said. "When you hear your name, walk to the mark, look at the red light, speak clearly, and smile." The whole country is watching. The whole country, I thought, including table 14. I closed my eyes for a second. I visualized the library. I visualized the way the light hit the maple floors I had salvaged. I visualized the faces of the kids reading in the quiet pods. That was real. That was truth. What was happening in Charlotte? The posturing, the debt, the glitter. That was the illusion. And illusions shatter when you hit them with enough light. 5 minutes! Renee squeezed my arm one last time. "Go get it." I stepped up to the edge of the curtain. The bright lights of the stage bled through the fabric. A line of pure white brilliance. I took a breath, filling my lungs with the cold, conditioned air of the studio. I left the phone in the bag. I left the girl in the kitchen. I stepped forward, out of the shadows, and into the blinding, beautiful glare. The stage lights in Chicago were hotter than I expected. They were not the soft, flattering glow of a vanity mirror. They were industrial-grade beams designed to strip away shadows and reveal everything. I stood on the designated mark, the floor beneath my heels vibrating with the low-frequency hum of the sound system. The master of ceremonies was Elena Ross, a woman whose opinion could make or break a design firm in 24 hours. She stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of black-tie guests. I watched her from the wings. My heart was not racing anymore. It had settled into a slow, heavy thud, like a war drum. "Architecture is often described as the art of shelter," Elena said, her voice smooth and practiced. "But our next winner understands that shelter is not just about a roof. It is about dignity. It is about seeing the people who have been written out of the city's narrative." She paused. The screen behind her, a massive LED wall that dwarfed the one at Carmine and Ash, began to play the B-roll footage. It showed the rusted beams of the warehouse. It showed my hands sanding the wood. It showed the veterans sitting in the quiet pods I had designed. She started her journey in a modest home in Charlotte, North Carolina. Elena continued. But her vision was never confined by her zip code. Tonight, for the Rising Vision Designer of the Year award, the winner is... The pause felt like it lasted a decade. I saw Renee in the front row. She was not smiling. She was leaning forward, her eyes intense, willing the name into existence. Savannah Phillips, of Northline Studio Collective. The room exploded. It was not polite applause. It was a roar. People were standing up. I walked out. I did not trip. I did not shake. I moved with the kinetic energy of someone who had been held down for too long and was finally released. I took the stairs, the emerald silk of my jumpsuit catching the light. I accepted the heavy crystal trophy from Elena. It was cool to the touch and solid. I stepped to the microphone. I looked directly into the camera lens. The red tally light was on. I knew that signal traveled at the speed of light, bouncing off satellites, beaming into living rooms, into bars, and into high-end restaurants across the country. "Thank you," I said. My voice was steady. "This award belongs to the community of the Lantern District. It belongs to the veterans who trusted me with their stories. And it belongs to Renee Hart, who taught me that you do not need permission to be excellent." I paused. This was the moment where the script usually called for the family tribute. This was where I was supposed to thank my mother for her patience and my father for his support. I let the silence hang there for 2 seconds. "I built this career with my own hands," I said, my eyes locking on the lens. "And I am just getting started." I walked off stage. I did not mention the Phillips name. I did not send love back home. I claimed the victory solely for the people who had actually helped me build it. 700 miles away, in the dim, amber-lit dining room of Carmine and Ash. The atmosphere was calibrated for exclusivity. The air smelled of truffle oil and expensive cologne. At table 14, the mood was tense. My father, Mark, was sweating slightly through his dress shirt. He was leaning in, talking rapidly to the man they had invited. A Mr. Sterling, a local investor with deep pockets and a shallow understanding of how desperate my father actually was. "The PR angle is solid," my father was saying, his voice a little too loud. "Sabrina is already a known entity in the city. We just need the capital to scale her lifestyle brand. The returns would be substantial within 6 months." Sabrina was nodding, practicing her serious businesswoman face. "We are thinking of a localized launch," she added, swirling her wine. "Very high-end, very curated." Mr. Sterling looked bored. He cut into his steak, chewing slowly. "I don't know, Mark. The market is saturated. Everyone has a lifestyle brand. But they don't have the story." My mother, Lynn, interjected, her smile tight. "The Phillips family has a story." And then the room changed. It was subtle at first. The ambient jazz music lowered slightly. The lighting shifted as the massive mirror panels on the main wall flickered from the fireplace loop to the live feed of the Lifestyle Network. The manager, true to his schedule, had switched the input at exactly 8:15. The massive screen, directly in the line of sight of table 14, filled with color. It was me. I was not the blurry girl in the background of a Polaroid. I was 10 feet tall. My face was high-definition flawless. The emerald jumpsuit looked like armor. I was holding the crystal trophy, and the chyron beneath my name was bold and unmissable. Savannah Phillips, winner. Rising Vision. Designer. The effect on table 14 was instantaneous. My father stopped talking mid-sentence. His mouth stayed open, but no sound came out. He stared at the screen as if he were seeing a ghost. My mother gasped, a sharp intake of breath that sounded like a hiccup. Her hand flew to her pearls, clutching them as if they were a lifeline. But it was Sabrina who had the most violent reaction. She was in the middle of raising her glass to Mr. Sterling, a toast to a deal that was not going to happen. When she saw my face, her arm locked, the wine sloshed over the rim, staining the white tablecloth with a blood-red splash. She did not lower the glass. She just froze. Mr. Sterling looked up from his steak. He looked at the screen. He looked back at my father. "Phillips? Mr.?" Sterling asked. "Is that relation?" The restaurant was quiet enough that the question carried. At the table directly next to them, a young woman with pink streaks in her hair looked up. She had been scrolling on her phone, ignoring her parents. She recognized Sabrina. Sabrina had spent years curating a local following, tagging herself at every hotspot in Charlotte. The girl's eyes widened. She looked at the TV. She looked at Sabrina. "Wait," the girl whispered, loud enough to be heard. "Isn't that your sister?" Sabrina turned pale. The meticulously applied bronzer stood out starkly against her sudden lack of color. She looked at the girl. She looked at Mr. Sterling. She looked at the screen where I was currently walking off stage to thunderous applause. Sabrina stammered. Her voice was high and thin. "She didn't tell us it was this." She sounded like a child who had been tricked. This, as if the award was a prank I had pulled on them, as if my success was an act of aggression. The girl at the next table did what any digital native would do. She sensed a moment. She lifted her phone, angling it discreetly between the water pitcher and the bread basket. She hit record. The camera caught my father wiping sweat from his upper lip. It caught my mother staring at the screen with a look of pure, unadulterated shock, and it caught Sabrina, the star, looking small and terrified. "I thought you said she was a drafter," Mr. Sterling said, his voice cooling considerably. "That looks like a national award. Mark?" "It is just a design thing," my father stuttered, trying to regain control of the narrative. You know how TV is. They blow everything out of proportion. But the TV was not done with them. The broadcast cut to a bumper segment before the commercial break. The music swelled, triumphant, inspiring strings. The screen faded from my face to a graphic slate designed to give background on the winner. It was a standard production element. The network liked to highlight the support systems behind the winners. The text appeared on the giant wall, looming over my family like a judgment. Special segment up next. The Phillips Family Fund, a community grant origin story, how a family's generosity launched a vision. The color did not just leave my father's face, it drained out of his entire body. He looked like a man who had been shot. He gripped the edge of the table so hard his knuckles turned white. My mother let out a low, strangled noise. "Mark," she whispered. "Mark, look at the screen." Sabrina lowered her glass slowly. Her eyes were darting back and forth, reading the words over and over. The Phillips Family Fund. I was in Chicago, walking down a hallway lined with cheering interns, completely unaware of this graphic. I had never heard of the Phillips Family Fund. I had never received a dime from a family fund. I had paid for my own tuition. I had paid for my own materials. I had paid for my own flight to this ceremony. But in the restaurant, the reaction was not confusion. It was terror. The girl at the next table zoomed in. Her phone captured the exact moment the realization hit them. They were not surprised by the name of the fund. They were terrified that it was on television. "Mark," Mr. Sterling said, reading the screen. "You have a family fund? A grant foundation?" My father could not speak. He looked like he was trying to swallow a stone. My father croaked. "It is complicated. You told me you were liquidating assets to help Sabrina," Mr. Sterling said, his eyes narrowing. "But you have a grant foundation funding national architectural projects?" "No," Sabrina shouted. It was too loud. Heads turned across the dining room. "No, it is not real. Savannah is lying." But the screen did not lie. The Lifestyle Network was a billion-dollar entity. They fact-checked, they vetted, or at least, they vetted the paperwork they were given. The girl at the next table kept recording. She captured the panic. She captured the way my mother looked at my father with eyes full of accusation. She captured the way Sabrina looked at the screen with hatred. Realizing that for the first time in her life, the camera was on her, but the script was not hers. They had come to Carmine and Ash to celebrate their own importance. They had come to sell a lie to an investor. But instead, they were sitting under a 20-foot billboard announcing a truth that I did not even know existed yet. The segment was about to start. The origin story was about to air. And judging by the way my father was looking for the exit, he knew exactly what story was about to be told. And he knew that it was a story he never intended for me, or the IRS, to hear. The silence of a hotel room after a gala is usually a heavy, lonely thing. It is the vacuum after the explosion. But when I walked back into my suite at the Palmer House Hilton, tossing my heels into the corner and unzipping the emerald jumpsuit, the room was not silent. My phone, which I had left on the bedside table, was vibrating against the glass surface. It was a continuous, angry buzz, like a trapped hornet. I had expected some congratulations. I had expected messages from colleagues, maybe a few emails from vendors I had worked with on the library project. I did not expect an avalanche. I picked up the phone. The screen was so full of notifications that I could not even see my background image. Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, text messages, missed calls. The numbers were scrolling up in real time. You have 99 plus new notifications. I sat down on the edge of the bed, the silk of my jumpsuit pooling around my waist. I tapped the Instagram icon. The first thing I saw was not a photo of my award. It was a video. It had been posted 40 minutes ago by a user named Charlotte Eats, and it already had 80,000 views. The thumbnail was a blurry, zoomed-in shot of a woman in a silver dress holding a wine glass. I pressed play. The video was shaky, filmed from a low angle, clearly hidden behind a breadbasket or a purse. The audio was a mix of restaurant chatter and the booming sound of the television broadcast. "Wait, isn't that your sister?" a voice behind the camera whispered. The camera zoomed in. On the screen within the screen, the massive mirror wall of carmine and ash, my face was 10 feet tall, holding the trophy. Then the camera whipped back to the table. It captured everything. It captured Sabrina freezing, her mouth slightly open, the wine glass tilting dangerously in her hand. It captured my mother clutching her chest as if she were having a coronary event. It captured my father turning a shade of gray that I had never seen on a living human being. "She didn't tell us it was this." Sabrina's voice squeaked on the video. It was high, defensive, and pathetic. The person filming let out a low, incredulous laugh. "Awkward," the caption read, "when you are at a fancy dinner to ignore your sister but she wins a national award on the TV right in front of you." I scrolled to the comments. The internet is a cruel place, but it is also a place that loves a villain. And tonight, the algorithm had decided that the villain was wearing a silver dress at table 14. "Look at her face," one comment read. "She looks like she just swallowed a lemon. That is pure jealousy." Another wrote, "Who gets mad when their sister wins an award? I know that girl." A third comment said, "That is Sabrina Phillips. She is always posting about how successful her family is. Guess she isn't the successful one." I felt a strange detachment. I was watching my family implode, but it felt like I was watching a documentary about strangers. I was not angry. I was not sad. I was just fascinated by the sheer efficiency of the destruction. I switched to the family group chat. It was a war zone. "Mom. Savannah, pick up your phone. Why didn't you tell us it was this kind of award? People are staring at us. Your father's having a panic attack. Dad, get this video taken down. Now. Someone is filming us. This is an invasion of privacy." Sabrina, "You did this on purpose. You knew we were going there. You set this up to humiliate me." Sabrina, "I look fat in this video. The angle is terrible." Savannah, "Tell them to delete it." Mom, "We had to leave the restaurant. We didn't even finish the appetizers. The manager asked us to keep it down because people were whispering. I read the messages twice. You did this on purpose." They still thought they were the main characters. They thought I had orchestrated a national television broadcast, coordinated a stranger's dinner reservation, and telepathically forced a bystander to film them, all just to ruin their night. They could not conceive of a world where I simply succeeded and they happened to be watching. I typed a reply. Then I deleted it. I typed another one. "I am sorry." I stared at those 3 words. "I am sorry." It was my reflex. It was the survival mechanism I had honed for 30 years. Apologize to keep the peace. Apologize to make Sabrina feel big again. I backspaced until the box was empty. I set the phone down. I did not reply. For the first time in my life, I let the silence sit there. I let them sit in their own mess. I was not going to clean it up. I was not going to explain. I was not going to soothe them. I ordered a club sandwich from room service and went to take a shower. When I came out, wrapped in a plush hotel robe, the situation had escalated from a family drama to a public relations crisis. The internet sleuths had arrived. Someone on Twitter had found Sabrina's old YouTube channel. She had started it 3 years ago during a brief phase where she wanted to be a lifestyle coach. People were retweeting a clip from 2021. In the video, Sabrina was sitting in her car, drinking an iced coffee, ranting to the camera. "My little sister is so annoying," the video Sabrina said, rolling her eyes. "She is in this design phase. She draws these little houses all day. It is so cute. But get a real job, right? Art doesn't pay the bills. I am out here grinding, making connections, and she is playing with cardboard." The juxtaposition was brutal. On the left side of the split-screen TikTok that was now trending, there was Sabrina mocking my cardboard houses. On the right side, there was the footage from tonight, me holding a crystal trophy, being honored for a $1 million community project. The comments were savage. "The cardboard house girl just won the Super Bowl of design. How is that grind going?" "Sabrina? The jealousy is radiating off this woman like nuclear waste. Justice for Savannah. I saw that Carmine and Ash had disabled their Instagram comments, apparently. People were flooding their page, asking why they allowed toxic families to dine there, or conversely, praising the manager for turning on the TV at the perfect moment. Then came the financial hit. Sabrina forwarded me an email she had just received, seemingly forgetting that I was the enemy, or perhaps so desperate for a fix that she needed my help to read it. It was from a boutique athletic wear brand. Sabrina had been posting about them for months, trying to land a paid partnership. They had finally sent her a contract last week for a small campaign. $500 and free leggings. Subject: Partnership update. Dear Sabrina, due to recent social media activity involving your personal brand, we feel that our values no longer align. We are a brand about empowerment and community support. The sentiment expressed in the videos currently circulating does not reflect the positivity we strive for. We are rescinding the offer effective immediately. Sabrina's text followed the screenshot. Sabrina, look what you did. This was my break. You have to fix this. Post a statement. Say we were joking. Say we are close. Do something. I looked at the timestamp. It was 1 a.m. in Chicago. I closed the group chat. I muted the notifications. I felt a profound sense of relief. It was as if a fever had broken. I realized that their anger could not touch me here. I was in a suite paid for by the National Design Council. I had a trophy on the desk that weighed 5 pounds. I had a career that was built on steel and concrete, not on likes and filters. I took a bite of my club sandwich. It was cold, but it tasted like victory. But the night was not done with me yet. My personal phone buzzed again. This time, it was a single text message from a number I respected more than any other. Renee Hart. Sav, are you awake? We need to talk. Not about the drama. I sat up straighter. Renee did not text at 1 a.m. for gossip. Savannah. I am up? What is wrong? Renee. I am at the after-party. A journalist from the Chicago Tribune just cornered me. She covers the financial beat, not design. My stomach tightened. Financial beat? Renee. She was asking about the Phillips Family Fund, the one mentioned in your intro package on the broadcast. I frowned. That segment, I had barely registered it in the chaos of the moment. I assumed it was just TV fluff, producers trying to make a heartwarming narrative out of my family's lukewarm support. Savannah. What about it? I figured the network just made up a name for the story. You know how they are. Renee. That is what I thought too. But this reporter, she says she pulled the records. She says the fund exists. It is registered as a 501c3 nonprofit in North Carolina. It has been active for 2 years. I stopped chewing. A nonprofit? Registered 2 years ago? Savannah. I have never heard of it. My parents don't have that kind of money. They complain about the price of gas. Renee. Sav. The reporter asked me if the grant money for your early projects came from there. I told her absolutely not. That the firm covered the pro bono costs. But she looked skeptical. She asked why a fund with your family's name, listing your father as the director, would file tax returns claiming they issued grants to community design initiatives if you never saw the money. The room suddenly felt very cold. I stood up and walked to the window. The lights of Chicago sprawled out below me, a grid of gold and amber, my father as the director. Community design initiatives. I thought back to the dinner. I thought back to the panic on my father's face when that graphic appeared on the screen. It wasn't just embarrassment, when the camera caught him gripping the table, turning white, sweating through his shirt. He wasn't reacting to my success. He wasn't reacting to Sabrina's jealousy. He was reacting to the words on the screen. The Phillips Family Fund. He was terrified because he knew something I didn't. I thought about the important friend at dinner, Mr. Sterling. I recalled Sabrina's text. Someone who can actually help the family. My mind raced. Connecting dots I hadn't even known were on the page. My parents had always been vague about money. But 2 years ago, right around the time I started getting press for the library project, my father had asked me for some paperwork. He said he needed my updated Social Security information and a copy of my driver's license for insurance purposes, because I was still listed on an old policy of theirs. I had sent it without thinking. I trusted them. They were my parents. What if the Phillips Family Fund wasn't a fund at all? What if it was a shell? What if they were using my resume, my project titles, and my growing reputation to solicit donations or grants, and then funneling that money somewhere else? Sabrina's lifestyle brand, I whispered to the empty room. The pieces clicked together with a sickening precision. Sabrina's sudden influx of cash for her investments, the expensive dinners, the trips, my father's insistence that you have to spend money to make money. They weren't just jealous of my work, they were using my work. They were selling a story where they were the benevolent patrons of the rising star architect, collecting checks from investors or donors who thought they were supporting community design, and using the cash to float Sabrina's delusions of grandeur. And tonight, on national television, the Lifestyle Network had accidentally blown their cover. They had publicly thanked a fund that, if my gut was right, was nothing more than a fraud built on my name. My phone buzzed again. Renee. The reporter is going to dig. Sav, if there is something messy there, you need to get in front of it, now. I looked at the trophy on the desk. 5 minutes ago. I thought my biggest problem was a jealous sister and a few mean texts. Now, I realized I was standing on the edge of a legal cliff. I did not reply to Renee. I did not reply to the group chat. I opened the browser on my phone and typed in the search bar. North Carolina Secretary of State, business search. I typed in the name. The Phillips Family Fund. The result popped up instantly. Status, active, registered, agent. Mark Phillips, principal office address. It was the address of my parents' house in Charlotte. I clicked on the filing history. The most recent annual report was filed 6 months ago. I downloaded the PDF. My hands were shaking. Not from nerves, but from a cold, hard rage. I scrolled down to the section listing the organization's mission statement: to support and fund the architectural and design endeavors of underprivileged communities. Spearheaded by rising vision designer Savannah Phillips. They had used my name, they had used my title, and I scrolled to the financials. Total revenue reported, $150,000. Grants disbursed, 0. Operating expenses, $145,000. $150,000. That was the exact amount my father had bragged about Sabrina raising for her rebranding last year. They stole my name, they stole my reputation, and they ate it. They ate it at Carmine and Ash. They wore it in silver sequins. They drove it around Charlotte. The viral video was funny. The comments were petty. But this was criminal. I looked at the group chat one last time. Sabrina was still typing, probably demanding I issue a public apology for ruining her night. I took a screenshot of the tax filing. I did not send it to them. I opened a new email draft. I typed in the address of the legal counsel for Northline Studio Collective. Subject: urgent, potential identity theft, and misappropriation of funds. I attached the PDF. I hit send. The tears finally came then. But they were hot and angry. They were not for the loss of their love. I had lost that a long time ago. They were for the sheer audacity of their betrayal. I walked over to the window and pressed my hand against the cold glass. You wanted to be famous, Sabrina? I whispered. You wanted the world to watch the Phillips family? I looked down at the city, my eyes dry now, hard as flint. Well, I said, they are watching now. The morning after the ceremony, the sunlight hitting the hotel sheets felt aggressive. I had slept for maybe 2 hours, a shallow, restless sleep interrupted by the phantom buzzing of my phone. I woke up with a headache that sat behind my eyes like a lead weight. I did not check the group chat. I did not check Instagram. I had seen enough the night before to know that the internet was currently dissecting my family dynamic with the enthusiasm of a biology class dissecting a frog. I had a different priority. I sat at the desk in the hotel room, wearing the complimentary bathrobe, and dialed the number for the National Design Council. It was 9 o'clock in the morning. Producer's office. This is Sarah. A chirpy voice answered. Hi, Sarah. This is Savannah Phillips. the Rising Vision winner. Oh my gosh, Savannah. Congratulations again. You were phenomenal last night. The ratings for your segment were through the roof. Thank you, I said, keeping my voice level. I actually had a question about the segment, specifically the production graphics. Sure, what is up? Did we spell something wrong? We triple-checked the spellings. No, the spelling was fine, I said. I am asking about the Phillips Family Fund graphic, the one that ran during the bumper. I don't recall submitting any information about a family foundation. There was a pause on the line. The sound of typing. Let me pull up your dossier, Sarah said. Okay, here we go. It is in the bio packet, Section 4, Funding and Support Origins. It says right here. The nominees' early career and pro bono initiatives were generously seed-funded by the Phillips Family Fund, a private grant organization dedicated to community architecture. I felt the blood drain from my face. Sarah, who submitted that packet? Well, the initial nomination came from your firm, Northline, she said. But we sent out a request for supplementary personal details about 3 weeks ago. We received a revised biodoc. It looks like it came from... She paused. It came from a Phillips shared email address. We assumed it was your personal account or an assistant. Phillips shared. I closed my eyes. I knew that email address. Phillips, Home, Connect. It was a relic from 10 years ago. A shared account my parents had set up when I was in college to share calendar invites and grocery lists. I hadn't logged into it since I graduated. But my password, my standard, old password, had likely never changed. I see, I said. My voice sounded mechanical. Can you forward me that email chain? Sarah, for my records. Sure thing. Is everything okay? Everything is fine. I lied. I just want to make sure I have the correct branding for my thank you notes. I hung up. 5 minutes later, the email arrived. I opened the attachment. It was my professional bio, the one Northline's marketing team had written. But it had been edited. The tracked changes showed deletions of sentences about my independent struggle and resourcefulness. In their place were paragraphs about familial backing and the Phillips legacy of philanthropy. The email accompanying the edit was signed, "Sent on behalf of Savannah Phillips." They had impersonated me. They had logged into an old account, intercepted the request from the Design Council, which must have been auto-forwarded there due to some ancient setting I forgot to disable, and rewrote my history. Why? To get the name of the fund on television. It was a marketing play, a desperate, reckless marketing play. They needed the Phillips Family Fund to look legitimate. And what better way to legitimize a shell company than to have it credited on a national broadcast as the benefactor of an award-winning architect? I felt sick. This wasn't just narcissism, this was fraud. I needed to know how deep the rot went. I opened my laptop and navigated to a credit monitoring site. I had not checked my credit score in a year. I paid my bills on autopay. I assumed everything was fine. I typed in my social security number. I answered the security questions. What street did you live on in 2015? What is the make of your car? The wheel spun on the screen. Then the dashboard loaded. My score was decent, but there was a red flag in the Open Accounts section. I clicked it. List of loans, student loans, paid off, car lease, active, and then, third on the list, lender, Piedmont Regional Credit Union. Type, small business/personal guarantor. Balance, $42,000. Opened, 26 months ago. I stared at the screen. $42,000. I did not have a loan with Piedmont Regional. I did not have a small business loan. I clicked for details. The address listed for the borrower was not my apartment in Denver. It was a house on Maple Street in Charlotte, my parents' house. The memory hit me with the force of a physical blow. 2 years ago, I was visiting home for Christmas. It was a rare, quiet afternoon. My father had come into the living room, looking stressed. He was holding a stack of papers. "Savannah," he had said, putting on his reading glasses, "I am updating the family life insurance policies. Since you are turning 30 soon, the rates change. I need to switch you to a different beneficiary tier so we don't lose the coverage. Okay, I had said, barely looking up from my book. I just need you to sign this authorization form, he said, sliding a paper across the table. And I need your social security number again. I can never remember it. I had written it down on a sticky note. I had signed the paper. I hadn't read the fine print. I thought I was helping him secure my future. I wasn't. I was co-signing alone. I sat back in the hotel chair, my hands shaking. They had used my credit. They had forged my signature or tricked me into signing a guarantor agreement to open a line of credit for the Phillips Family Fund or whatever venture Sabrina was trying to launch that week, and they had spent it. $42,000. Gone. And the Phillips Family Fund tax return I had found last night showed revenue of $150,000. If they borrowed $42,000 in my name, where did the rest come from? Investors. Like the man at the dinner, the picture was becoming terrifyingly clear. My phone buzzed. It was Renee. Meet me in the lobby. Now? I threw on jeans and a sweater. I didn't bother with makeup. I took the elevator down, clutching my laptop like a shield. Renee was sitting in a secluded corner of the hotel bar, which was closed for the morning. She had 2 coffees and a look on her face that could cut glass. "Tell me," she said as soon as I sat down. I turned the laptop around and showed her the credit report. I showed her the email chain from the Design Council. Renee looked at the screen for a long time. She took a sip of black coffee. "This is not a family dispute. Savannah," she said. Her voice was low and deadly serious. "This is identity theft. This is wire fraud. This is grand larceny." "They are my parents," I whispered. It was a weak defense, but it was the only one my brain could formulate. "They are criminals," Renee corrected. "They impersonated you to a national organization. They took out debt in your name, and judging by that tax return you found last night, they are soliciting money from investors under false pretenses, using your career as the bait." She leaned forward. "Think about the dinner. Savannah. Why were they there?" I thought about the man, Mr. Sterling, the important friend. "Sabrina said he could help the family," I said. Dad was sweating. He was desperate to impress him. "Exactly," Renee said. "They are running a Ponzi scheme of influence. They borrow money to make Sabrina look successful. They use that illusion of success to get more investors, but the money runs out, so they needed a new hook. You?" "Me," I said. "You are the only thing in that family with real value," Renee said brutally. "They needed Mr. Sterling to see you winning that award. They needed him to see the Phillips Family Fund on the screen. That graphic wasn't for you. It was a prop for their pitch. They were going to point to the TV and say, 'Look, our fund is legitimate. We backed her. Invest with us, and we will find the next Savannah Phillips.'" I felt like I was going to be sick. The dinner, the text calling the award stupid. It wasn't just that they didn't care. It was that they were terrified. They needed the award to happen, but they needed me to stay small enough to control. They needed the credit, but they didn't want me asking questions about the source. "What do I do?" I asked. Renee pulled a business card from her blazer pocket. "This is a friend of mine, Marcus Thorne. He is not a family lawyer. He is a forensic accountant and a civil litigator. You call him. Today. And then? You freeze everything," Renee said. "You lock your credit. You file a police report regarding the identity theft." "A police report? Against my father?" "Savannah," Renee said, grabbing my hand, "if this fund implodes, and it will, and your name is on the founding documents or the guarantor loans, you go down with it. The IRS does not care that you were the quiet child. They only care whose signature is on the line." I took the card, Marcus Thorne. Escrow. My phone started buzzing again. Not a text this time. A call. It was a number I didn't recognize. Area code 704. Charlotte. I let it go to voicemail. Then another call. Same area code. I looked at Renee. "The press," she said. "The morning shows. They saw the family fund graphic. They saw the viral video. Now they want the heartwarming story of the family behind the genius. They are calling my parents." I realized. And your parents, Renee said, are currently trying to figure out how to spin this without going to jail. I imagined the scene in Charlotte. The hangover at the Phillips house must be apocalyptic. The important friend, Mr. Sterling, had likely asked some very hard questions after seeing the panic at the dinner table, and now, reporters were calling to ask about the benevolent family fund that supposedly launched my career. If my father answered one of those calls, if he went on record lying about the fund to save face, he would be digging a hole so deep he would never climb out. I stood up. I need to go, I said. Where? I have to make a call, I said. Not to them, to the lawyer. I walked out of the lobby and into the cold Chicago wind. I dialed the number on the business card. Thorne and Associates, a receptionist answered. I need to speak to Marcus Thorne, I said. My name is Savannah Phillips. I believe I am the victim of financial identity theft involving a non-profit organization. As I said the words, I felt a strange snapping sensation in my chest. It was the final tether, the last little thread of hope that my family was just complicated or difficult. They weren't complicated. They were thieves. And as I stood on the sidewalk, watching the traffic rush by, I realized something else about the dinner at Carmine and Ash. The reason my father had been so terrified when the TV screen lit up the reason Sabrina had screamed wasn't just because I had won. It was because they knew that the moment the words Phillips Family Fund appeared on national television, the clock had started ticking. They had brought a bomb to dinner, hoping to use it as leverage, but they didn't realize that I was the one holding the detonator. I looked at the phone in my hand. Mr. Thorne is available, the receptionist said. Putting you through? Thank you, I said. I was done building shelters for everyone else. It was time to build a fortress for myself. The flight back to Charlotte felt less like a homecoming and more like a tactical deployment. I did not tell them I was coming. I did not ask for a ride from the airport. I rented a car, a gray sedan that smelled of synthetic lemon, and drove straight to a coffee shop on the edge of the downtown district. I chose the location carefully. 3rd Street Roasters was neutral territory. It was all concrete floors and exposed ductwork, loud with the sound of grinding beans and indie folk music. It was not the kind of place where my mother could make a scene without looking ridiculous. It was not the kind of place where my father could charm the waitress. It was cold, efficient, and public. I texted the group chat once I was seated at a corner table, my back to the wall. I am at 3rd Street Roasters. Be here in 30 minutes, all of you. I did not wait for a reply. I placed a manila folder on the table in front of me. Inside were the credit report, the tax filings for the Phillips Family Fund, and the email logs from the Design Council. I ordered a black coffee and waited. Sabrina arrived first. I saw her through the plate glass window before she saw me. She looked different. The glossy, high-definition Sabrina from Instagram was gone. In her place was a woman wearing oversized sunglasses and a tracksuit that looked slept in. Her hair, usually blown out to perfection, was pulled back in a severe, messy knot. She walked in, scanning the room frantically. When she spotted me, her shoulders slumped. She walked over and pulled out the chair opposite me. The metal legs scraped loudly against the concrete floor. She did not say hello. She took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red-rimmed, puffy, and underlined with dark circles that concealer had failed to hide. "You look happy," she said. Her voice was scratchy. "I am not happy. Sabrina," I said. "I am busy." "You ruined me," she whispered. The tears started instantly, welling up and spilling over. It was a performance I had seen 1,000 times, but there was a jagged edge to it today. "Do you know what my DMs look like? People are telling me to kill myself. They are digging up photos from my prom. They are calling me a parasite." I watched her cry. A week ago, I would have reached across the table. I would have offered a napkin. I would have said it's okay. Ignore them. Today. I took a sip of my coffee. "You went viral," I said calmly. "Isn't that what you always wanted?" "Not like this," she hissed, looking around to see if anyone was watching. I lost the athletic wear contract. The local magazine pulled my feature for next month. I can't even go to Carmine and Ash because the manager banned us for causing a disturbance. She leaned in, her expression shifting from self-pity to a desperate, wheedling negotiation. But look, Savannah, you can fix this. You have the platform now. You are the rising vision girl. If you just post something, maybe a photo of us together, or if you could mention that I am actually part of your team. I stared at her. Part of my team? I mean, I could be, she said, nodding quickly. I have a good eye for branding. You are going to need PR, right? With all this attention? I could handle your press. We could spin this whole family fund thing into a positive. We could say it was a miscommunication. But now we are launching a joint venture. The audacity was breathtaking. It was so immense it was almost architectural. Let me get this straight, I said, keeping my voice low. Yesterday, you texted me that my award was stupid. You sat at dinner and rolled your eyes while I accepted the biggest honor of my career, and now, 24 hours later, you want me to hire you? You want the stupid award to pay your salary? Sabrina flinched. I didn't mean it like that. I was stressed. You know how Dad gets. This isn't about Dad, I said. This is about you. You want me to use my credibility to patch the holes in your sinking ship. I am your sister, she pleaded. What am I supposed to do? Go work at a retail counter? I have a brand to maintain. Then maintain it, I said. But you will not use my mortar to build your facade. Before she could respond, the door opened. My parents walked in. They looked like they had aged 10 years in a single night. My father, usually upright and blustering with false confidence, walked with a stoop. He was wearing a golf polo, but he hadn't shaved. My mother was wearing a trench coat, belted tightly as if she were bracing for a hurricane. They saw us and hurried over. They did not hug me. They sat in the remaining chairs, forming a tight, anxious circle around the manila folder. Savannah, my father said, breathless. Thank God you are here. We have been trying to call you. The phone has not stopped ringing. NBC called the house. The Charlotte Observer is parked on the street. We need to get our story straight, my mother added. Reaching for my hand, I pulled it away before she could make contact. We need to issue a statement clarifying the family fund situation before it gets out of hand. There is no family fund situation, I said. There is just fraud. My father stiffened. Now, hold on. That is a strong word. It is the legal word, I said. I opened the folder. I slid the email log across the table. You impersonated me. You accessed my old email account. You intercepted a request from the National Design Council, and you rewrote my biography to include a foundation that has never given me a dime. That is fraud. Dad, that is wire fraud because you did it over the internet across state lines. My father looked at the paper. He licked his lips. We were just polishing the narrative. Savannah, we wanted to look like a supportive family. Is that a crime? Wanting to be part of your success? You didn't want to be part of it, I said. You wanted to own it. You wanted investors to believe that you were the bank behind the architect. We just added a little story on my mother said, her voice trembling. Everyone does it. It is marketing. We didn't think they would put a graphic on the TV screen. We thought it would just be in the program pamphlet. So you intended to lie, I said. You just didn't intend to get caught by 2 million viewers. We were doing it for you, my father insisted, his voice rising. To make you look like you came from good stock. It looks better if you have institutional backing. Savannah, we were trying to help you. Bullshit, I said. The word hung in the air. I never swore in front of them. I was the good girl. I was the quiet one. I reached into the folder again. I pulled out the credit report. I slid it over the email log. It landed in the center of the table, the red ink of the derogatory mark visible to everyone. Explain this, I said. My father looked down. He saw the number, $42,000. He saw the lender name, Piedmont Regional Credit Union. He went silent. He didn't bluster. He didn't make an excuse. He just deflated. My mother looked at the paper, then at me, then at Sabrina. She started to shake. Her hands, resting on the table, were vibrating. "Savannah," my mother whispered. "That was a mistake. A mistake is a typo," I said. "A mistake is forgetting to take the chicken out of the freezer. This is a loan taken out in my name, using a power of attorney or a forged signature. 2 years ago, I never saw this money. Where is it?" My father wouldn't look at me. He was staring at the exposed ductwork on the ceiling. "Mom," I said, turning to her, "where is the $42,000? My mother looked at Sabrina. Sabrina was looking at her lap, picking at a loose thread on her tracksuit. "It was a bridge loan," my mother said, her voice barely audible over the sound of the espresso machine. 2 years ago, when she had that issue with the event planning company, I remembered. Sabrina had tried to launch a high-end event planning service. She had thrown a massive launch party. It was lavish. Champagne towers, influencers, and then, 3 months later, the company quietly folded. She needed to pay the vendors, my mother said, tears leaking from her eyes. They were threatening to sue her. It would have ruined her reputation. "We didn't have the liquidity. Your father's bonus hadn't come in yet. So you used my credit," I said. "We intended to pay it off," my father said. Suddenly finding his voice, "We were going to pay it off within 6 months, but then the market turned, and the interest rates went up, and we just fell behind. We forgot it was in your name. We thought we had more time." "You forgot," I repeated. "You forgot that you sold my financial future to pay for Sabrina's champagne tower." "I needed that party," Sabrina screamed. The sound cut through the coffee shop. The barista stopped grinding beans. 2 people at a nearby table turned to look. Sabrina didn't care. She slammed her hand on the table. "You don't understand," she yelled, her face twisting into something ugly and raw. "You always had it easy. Savannah, you were the smart one. You were the one who could draw. You were the one who could sit in a room for hours and build things. You always had a future." She pointed a shaking finger at me. "I had nothing. I had to be pretty. That is all I had. I had to be the one who smiled and made everyone feel good. That is hard work. And when I tried to build something, when I tried to be a boss like you, it fell apart. They laughed at me. Mom and Dad didn't want me to be embarrassed. They were protecting me because I am fragile. You aren't fragile. You are a robot. You could handle the debt. I couldn't." I looked at her. I looked at the sister who had bullied me for decades, who had called my work cute and my awards stupid, and finally, I understood. It wasn't just jealousy, it was survival. In the ecosystem of our family, Sabrina was a parasite that had convinced itself it was the host, and my parents were the ones feeding her. "She is right," my father said quietly. "Savannah, you are strong. You have a career. You can absorb this hit. We can work out a payment plan. But if this comes out, if the fraud comes out, Sabrina is done. I am done." He looked at me with pleading eyes. "We are family," he said. "Family protects each other." I stood up. The chair scraped against the floor. I felt incredibly tall. I looked down at the 3 of them, the weeping mother, the broken father, the hysterical sister. "You are not a family," I said. My voice was not loud, but it was clear enough that the couple at the next table stopped chewing their muffins to listen. "A family nurtures," I said. "A family supports. This?" I gestured to the folder on the table. "This is a machine. It is a machine designed to keep Sabrina the center of the universe. You feed it money, you feed it lies, and when you ran out of your own fuel, you started feeding it parts of me." "Savannah, please," my mother sobbed. "I am not fuel," I said, "and I am not your insurance policy." I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a small, crisp, white card. It was the card for Marcus Thorne, the forensic accountant and litigator Renee had introduced me to. I placed it gently on top of the credit report. I have retained counsel, I said. His name is Mr. Thorne. He is very good, and he is very expensive. He will be contacting you regarding the unauthorized use of my identity and the immediate repayment of the Piedmont Regional Loan. Lawyer? My father gasped. You are suing your own parents? I am disputing a fraudulent debt, I said. If you want to call it suing, that is up to you. But I am freezing my credit. I am issuing a cease and desist to the Phillips Family Fund, and I am releasing a statement to the press clarifying that I have no affiliation with your organization. You will destroy us, Sabrina whispered. If you do that, everyone will know. I looked at her one last time. I looked at the silver eyeshadow smeared beneath her eyes. They already know. Sabrina, I said. They are just waiting for the paperwork to match the reality. I buttoned my coat. From now on, I said, do not call me, do not text me, do not tag me. If you have something to say to me, say it to Mr. Thorne. Everything goes through paper now. I turned around and walked toward the door. Savannah, my mother wailed. Don't walk away. We love you. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I pushed open the glass door and stepped out into the Charlotte sunlight. The air was warm, but for the first time in 32 years, I didn't feel the suffocating weight of the house on Maple Street. I felt light. I walked to the gray rental car, unlocked it, and got in. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I didn't look like a robot. I looked like a survivor who had finally cut the rope. I started the engine. It was time to go back to Denver. It was time to go back to the life I had built, the one that stood up on its own, without any hidden debts to hold it down. The first step in dismantling a lie is not screaming the truth. It is simply removing the scaffolding that holds the fabrication together. Back in Denver, the air was crisp and thin, a stark contrast to the humid, suffocating atmosphere of the coffee shop in Charlotte. I sat at my desk at Northline Studio Collective. The door closed, and composed the most important email of my career. It was not to a client. It was not to a contractor. It was to the board of directors of the National Design Council. I did not write it with anger. I wrote it with the cold precision of a structural engineer condemning an unsafe building. To the board, I typed, there has been a material error in my biographical data regarding the source of my funding. The Phillips Family Fund is not, and has never been, a benefactor of my work. All early-stage projects were self-funded through freelance labor and institutional grants provided by Northline Studio Collective. I request an immediate and public correction to the official record. I hit send. I did not ask for an apology from my parents. I did not ask for them to confess. I simply cut the cord. By legally disavowing the fund, I was removing the only asset they had left to sell, my name. The response from the council was swift and panicked. Within 2 hours, the special segment graphic was scrubbed from their website. A formal addendum was issued to the press. The narrative of the supported daughter vanished, replaced by the reality of the self-made architect, but that was only the public battle. The private war was being fought in the office of Marcus Thorne. Marcus was a man who viewed numbers as crime scenes. We met via video conference 3 days after I returned to Colorado. He held up a piece of paper to the camera. It was a digital scan of the loan application from the Piedmont Regional Credit Union. I have the handwriting analysis back, Marcus said. His voice was gravelly, the voice of a man who had seen too many families destroy themselves over decimal points. We compared the signature on the guarantor line to the birthday cards you provided. It is a match for your father, Mark Phillips, but the date next to it? The handwriting style shifts slightly. It looks like your mother filled in the dates. I stared at the screen. A collaborative effort. One parent to sign my name, the other to date the crime. They did not just forge it, Marcus continued. They used your old driver's license number, the one that expired 3 years ago. The bank should have caught it, but small credit unions often waive strict checks for long-standing community members. Your father banked on his reputation to bypass security. So, what happens now? I asked. Now we execute the dispute, Marcus said. We file an affidavit of identity theft. We send it to the credit bureaus. We send it to the bank. We freeze your credit so tight that you will not be able to buy a stick of gum on a payment plan without a thumbprint scan. And we demand the bank produce the original wet ink documents. And the loan? I asked. The $42,000? Once the affidavit is filed, Marcus said, the debt is no longer yours. It reverts to the person who actually received the funds. The bank will go after the account holder, your father. I nodded. It was a mechanical process. Fill out a form, check a box, notarize a signature. But with every box I checked, I was effectively tightening a noose around the house on Maple Street. 2 days later, the email from Sabrina arrived. It was not a text this time. It was a long, rambling email sent at 3 a.m. The subject line was simply, "Please read." I opened it. Savannah. It began. I know you are angry. You have every right to be. But please, think about what you are doing. Mom hasn't eaten in 2 days. Dad is sitting in the dark in his study. We made mistakes. Yes. But we did it because we wanted to be like you. We wanted to be successful. Is that a crime? To want to be on your level? I am begging you, she wrote, don't file the fraud report. If you do, the investors for my new venture will pull out. They are already asking questions about the TV correction. If the police get involved, I will never work in this town again. I will be nothing. Just let us pay you back. We can pay $500 a month. We promise. Just don't make this a legal thing. We are sisters. I read the email twice. We are sisters. She had not acted like a sister when she called my award stupid. She had not acted like a sister when she used my credit to buy champagne for a launch party. She was only playing the sister card now because the other cards, intimidation, dismissal, mockery, had been removed from the deck. I hovered my mouse over the reply button. I wanted to write back. I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to tell her that $500 a month would take 7 years to pay off the principal, ignoring interest. I wanted to tell her that wanting to be successful is not a defense for larceny, but then I remembered Renee's advice. Don't look at them. Look at the horizon. If I replied, even to say no, I was engaging, I was giving her fuel, I was letting her know that she still had the power to make me type, to make me explain, to make me feel. I moved the mouse. I clicked archive. I did not reply. It was the loudest silence of my life. For 30 years, I had chased them, begged them, explained myself to them. Now, I simply let them scream into the void. The following Monday, Renee called me into her office. The mood at Northline was buzzing. The phone lines had been busy since the awards ceremony. But today, something was different. Sit down, Renee said. She looked tired but pleased. She pushed a thick dossier across her desk. What is this? I asked. The city council saw your retraction, Renee said. They saw that you turned down the family money narrative. They were impressed. They realized you are not a Nepo baby with a hobby. You are a serious operator. She tapped the dossier. They are greenlighting a new zone, she said. The Project Lantern District. It is not just one library anymore. It is 4 city blocks, affordable housing, a community market, 2 parks, and a vocational training center. They want Northline to lead it. I opened the file. The scope was massive. It was the kind of project that defined a decade. And, Renee said, leaning back, they specifically requested that the creative direction be handled by the Rising Vision winner. They don't want the partners. They want you. I looked up at her. Me? Lead the whole district? We are promoting you, Renee said. Director of Community Architecture. It comes with a new office, a new team, and a salary that will make sure you never have to worry about a $42,000 loan again. She paused, her eyes softening. You built this, Savannah. You built it out of rust and empathy. Now go build the rest of it. I walked out of that office feeling like my feet were not touching the ground. I went straight to the drafting room. I didn't call my parents to brag. I didn't post it on Instagram. I just sat down, rolled up my sleeves, and started sketching the elevation for the new market hall. But the world outside was still watching. The press had pivoted. The viral family reaction story had burned itself out, replaced by a curiosity about the woman who had walked away from it. Architectural Record requested an interview. The Denver Post wanted a follow-up. I agreed to one sit-down interview with a respected journalist from a national culture magazine. We met at the library I had designed. We sat in the quiet pods, surrounded by the warm, filtered light I had fought so hard to create. The journalist, a sharp woman named Elena, asked about the materials. She asked about the lighting. She asked about the community impact. And then, inevitably, she asked the question. "Your family became a bit of a meme last week," Elena said gently. There was a lot of speculation about their reaction, and then the correction about the funding. It seems like there is a distance there. How does your family feel about your success now? I looked at the recorder on the table. I thought about the email from Sabrina. I thought about the credit report. I thought about the little girl standing by the stove. I think, I said slowly, choosing my words like stones for a foundation, that we often confuse shared DNA with shared values. My family has their own path. I have mine. Does it bother you, she asked, that they don't seem to get it? I looked her in the eye. I did not build my life to ask for permission to be recognized, I said. And I certainly didn't build it to be a backdrop for someone else's performance. The work speaks for itself. If you need a translator to understand my value, then you are not my audience. The interview ran 2 days later. The quote, "I did not build my life to ask for permission," was pulled out in bold text. It went viral. But this time, it wasn't viral because of drama. It was viral because it resonated. Women shared it. Creatives shared it. People who had been the black sheep, or the quiet one, shared it. It became a rallying cry for anyone who had ever been told they were too careful, too quiet, or too hard to market. Sabrina, predictable as a pendulum, could not handle the shift. She saw the quote. She saw the praise I was getting. She saw that the narrative had moved on, leaving her behind as a footnote. So she turned on the camera. She went live on TikTok. I didn't watch it live. One of the interns at Northline sent me the screen recording later, with a note that just said, "Yikes." I watched it in the safety of my new office. Sabrina was sitting on the floor of her bedroom. She was wearing the same tracksuit she had worn at the coffee shop. She was holding a glass of wine, and she was crying. "It is so unfair," she slurred into the camera. "I supported her my whole life. I let her follow me around. And now she acts like she is better than us? She calls herself self-made? Who drove her to art class? Who told her she was talented?" She took a messy sip of wine. "She is ungrateful," Sabrina yelled. "She is letting her own father go bankrupt. She is sending lawyers after us. Over a little bit of money. We are family. She is betraying the family." The comments on the live stream were scrolling by so fast they were a blur, but I could catch the general sentiment. "Girl, give it a rest. You stole her identity? Did you just admit that? This is embarrassing. Go to sleep. Team Savannah all the way." She was trying to play the victim, but she had forgotten the first rule of the internet. Receipts matter. The public had seen the tax filings. They had seen the retraction. They knew she was lying. By trying to destroy me, she was live streaming her own self-destruction. I turned off the video. I didn't feel triumph. I felt a heavy, dull sadness. It was like watching a building collapse because the foundation had never been cured properly. It was inevitable, but it was still a waste. I went back to work. I had a district to design. 2 days later, the phone rang. It was Marcus Thorne. "Savannah," he said, "we have a development." "Did they contest the dispute?" I asked. "No," Marcus said. "The bank has completed its internal review. They have acknowledged that the signature on the loan documents does not match the specimen on file for your current legal documents. They are accepting the affidavit of forgery." "So the debt is gone?" I asked, feeling a weight lift off my chest. "The debt is removed from your name," Marcus said. But that triggers the next step. The bank's fraud department has flagged the account. Because the amount is over $10,000 and because it involves interstate wire transfers. They are preparing to refer the case to the district attorney. He paused. However, Marcus said, because it is a family matter, and because the bank primarily wants their money back. They reached out to me first. They are willing to offer a deal. If your father agrees to a confession of judgment, admitting the debt is his, and agrees to a strict repayment plan with a lien on his house. They might hold off on pressing criminal charges, but they need your cooperation. They need to know if you want to push for prosecution. I stood up and walked to the window of my new office. I looked out at the Denver skyline. If I push, I said, what happens? Your father goes to prison, Marcus said bluntly. Identity theft, wire fraud, bank fraud. He would be looking at 3 to 5 years, minimum, and your mother and sister would likely be implicated as accessories. And if I don't? They lose the house, Marcus said. The lien will likely force a sale to cover the $42,000 plus penalties. They will be financially ruined, but they will not be in handcuffs. The choice sat in the room with me. On one side was the justice they deserved, the pure, unadulterated consequence of their actions. They had stolen from me. They had lied. They had tried to drag me down. On the other side was the house on Maple Street, the house where I had built my cardboard cities, the house where I had stood by the stove. It was not about mercy. It was about who I wanted to be when the dust settled. Did I want to be the architect who put her family in prison? Or did I want to be the architect who simply evicted them from her life? Savannah, Marcus asked, what do you want to do? I looked at the drawing on my desk. It was the plan for the Lantern District. It was a place of new beginnings, a place where things were built right. I took a deep breath. I knew the answer. It wasn't the answer Sabrina wanted. It wasn't the answer my anger wanted, but it was the answer that would finally, truly, set me free. Marcus, I said, draft the agreement. The final confirmation from the Piedmont Regional Credit Union did not arrive with a bang. It arrived in a standard business envelope, delivered by a courier to Marcus Thorne's office in Denver. I sat across from Marcus as he slid the document toward me. The forensic analysis was conclusive. The signature on the loan application was a forgery, albeit a practiced one, but the smoking gun was not the handwriting. It was the address. The bank records showed that 3 days after the loan was approved, the mailing address for the account statements had been manually changed from the electronic default to a physical post office box in a strip mall 3 towns over from Charlotte. A post office box registered to my mother, Lynn Phillips. They had not just stolen my identity, they had built a firewall to ensure I never saw the smoke. They knew that if a statement came to my address in Denver, the game would be over. So they routed the evidence to a metal box in a dusty strip mall, intercepting the truth before it could ever reach me. This is intent, Marcus said, tapping the paper. This proves they knew it was wrong. They took active steps to conceal the activity. In a court of law, this destroys any defense of accidental oversight or miscommunication. This is calculated fraud. I looked at the document. It was cold. It was bureaucratic. And it was the final nail in the coffin of the image I had held of my parents for 32 years. They were not just bad with money. They were architects of deceit. That afternoon, my phone rang. It was my father. I had not spoken to him since I walked out of the coffee shop in Charlotte. I had blocked his number, but Marcus had advised me to unblock it for 24 hours to see if they would accept the settlement offer before we went to the district attorney. I stared at the screen. Dad, I picked up. I did not say hello. I just held the phone to my ear and listened to the static on the line. Savannah? His voice was unrecognizable, the booming, confident baritone of Mark Phillips, the man who held court at dinner parties, the man who lectured me on the value of $1, was gone. In its place was the thin, trembling voice of an old man who was frightened. I am here, I said. Mr. Thorne sent over the paperwork, he said. He sounded like he was having trouble getting enough air into his lungs. The confession of judgment and the lien agreement. Okay, I said. Savannah, honey, he said, and the endearment felt like sandpaper against my skin. If we sign this, it goes on public record. The bank puts a lien on the house. People will see it. The guys at the club, the neighbors, they will know we are insolvent. They will know we committed fraud. They will know the truth, I said. Can't we handle this privately? He begged. It was a desperate, wet sound. I can borrow from my 401k. I can sell the boat. We can pay you back directly. Please don't file the papers. Don't make this a matter of record. You are destroying our reputation. I walked to the window of my office. I looked down at the construction site of the Lantern District. I saw the excavators moving earth. I saw the steel beams rising. It was messy work. Building something real, you had to dig deep. You had to expose the dirt before you could pour the foundation. I am not destroying your reputation, Dad, I said. I am just correcting the record. But why? He asked, his voice cracking. Why are you doing this to us? We are your flesh and blood. Because you were going to let me go to prison, I said. The line went silent. If the IRS had audited that fake fund, I continued, my voice steady and cold, or if the bank had come after me for the default you were hiding, you would have let me take the fall. You proved that at dinner. You proved that when you forged my name, you were willing to burn my life to keep yours warm. No, he whispered. Never. Yes, I said. And here's the thing, Dad, I am not canceling you. I am not acting out of spite. I am simply stopping the cover-up. I am letting the consequences land where they belong. You dug the hole. Now you have to stand in it. I hung up. 10 minutes later, Marcus called. They had signed. But the unraveling was not finished. The universe, it seemed to me, had a way of balancing the scales that went beyond legal paperwork. During the discovery process, Marcus had looked into the background of Mr. Sterling, the important friend my parents had brought to Carmine and Ash, the man they had been so desperate to impress. It turned out Mr. Sterling was not a venture capitalist. He was not a philanthropist. He was a hard money lender. He operated in the gray areas of finance, offering high-interest loans to people who had been rejected by traditional banks. He was a shark who circled people who were drowning. The twist landed in my stomach like a stone. My parents hadn't taken Sabrina to that dinner to get investment for a lifestyle brand. They hadn't gone there to launch a business. They were there because they were drowning in debt. Debt likely accrued from years of funding Sabrina's failed projects and maintaining their own facade. They were there to beg Mr. Sterling to refinance their loans, and their pitch, their only collateral, was me. They had planned to point at the TV screen, show him my award, show him the Phillips Family Fund graphic, and say, "See? We have access to the rising star. She is our golden goose, if you lend us the money. We can control her. We can funnel her earnings through the family." They were essentially selling shares in a human being. When I realized this, the last lingering shred of guilt I felt about the lien on their house evaporated. They weren't just bad parents. They were traffickers of my potential. The settlement was finalized a week later. The terms were brutal but fair. My father signed a document admitting to the fraudulent loan. The debt was transferred legally to his name. A lien was placed on the house on Maple Street, meaning they could not sell it, refinance it, or borrow against it until every cent of the $42,000, plus legal fees, was repaid to the bank. They kept the house, but they lost the ownership of it. They were tenants in their own museum. The fallout in Charlotte was quiet, but it was total. There were no headlines in the paper about the fraud. I had spared them that final indignity by settling civilly rather than pressing for a criminal trial. But in the tight-knit circles of Charlotte society, secrets wrought faster than they spread. The Phillips Family Fund was dissolved. The rumors started. People noticed that Mark Phillips was no longer playing golf on Saturdays. They noticed that Lynn Phillips was no longer hosting the spring garden party. They had lost face. And for people who lived entirely for the reflection in the mirror, that was a fate worse than prison. And Sabrina? The brand was dead. The viral video of her meltdown, combined with the public disavowal from the athletic company and the revelation of the fraud, made her toxic. No sponsor would touch her. No event planner would hire her. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that she had moved out of the big house. She couldn't handle the tension of living with our parents, who now blamed her, privately, of course, for the collapse of their scheme. She was working as a receptionist at a dental office in the suburbs. It was a perfectly respectable job. It paid the bills. It required her to be on time, to be organized, and to be polite to people who didn't know who she was. For the first time in her life, Sabrina Phillips had to be a person, not a persona. As for me, I had one final move to make. The Phillips Family Fund was a lie. But the idea of it, the idea of supporting people who started from nothing, was powerful. I didn't want to let the concept die with my parents' fraud. I used the bonus from the Project Lantern promotion. I put up $50,000 of my own money I had earned, money that was clean. I launched the Lantern Grant. It was a scholarship and seed money fund for young designers from underrepresented backgrounds. The application process was simple. No pedigree required. No family connections needed. Just a portfolio and a vision. I announced it in a small press release. I didn't put my face on it. I didn't name it after myself. I named it after the light. The response was overwhelming. Applications flooded in from kids who were drawing on napkins, kids who were building cities in their closets, kids who had been told they were too quiet to succeed. I was reading through the first batch of applications in my new office when my personal phone buzzed. It was a text message. I looked at the sender. Sabrina. I hadn't heard from her in 3 months. I hesitated. My thumb hovered over the delete button. But curiosity, that old architectural instinct to see the structure of things, made me open it. It was short. There were no emojis. There were no excuses. There was no request for money. I saw the Lantern Grant announcement. She wrote, "You won. Not because of the award, but because you aren't afraid of us anymore. I am answering phones now. It is boring, but I pay my own rent. I guess that is what you wanted." I stared at the screen. I guess that is what you wanted. She still didn't quite get it. I didn't want her to answer phones. I didn't want her to be bored. I just wanted her to be real. I wanted her to know the weight of $1 that wasn't stolen. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Her text wasn't an olive branch. It was a surrender. And you don't negotiate with a surrender. You just accept it and keep moving. I put the phone down and turned off the screen. I stood up and grabbed my hard hat. I had a sight walk to do. I drove out to the Lantern District. It was twilight. The sun was setting behind the Rockies, casting long purple shadows across the city. The structure of the community market was finished. The skeleton of the building stood tall and strong against the sky. I walked through the open frame of the entrance. The smell of sawdust and curing concrete filled the air. It was the smell of progress. I reached the center of the main hall. Above me, the temporary work lights were strung up, waiting to be replaced by the permanent fixtures, the fixtures I had designed to look like lanterns. I walked over to the breaker panel. I flipped the switch. With a hum, the lights flickered on. A warm, golden glow flooded the space. It illuminated the steel beams, the concrete floor, the dust motes dancing in the air. It was beautiful. It was solid. It was real. I stood there in the center of the light, alone, but not lonely. My parents were in a house they didn't own, worrying about what the neighbors thought. Sabrina was sitting at a reception desk, learning the hard way that applause doesn't pay rent. And I was here. I looked at the blueprints in my hand. Then I looked up at the roof I had built. I realized then that revenge isn't about shouting. It isn't about making them cry. It isn't about viral videos or lawsuits or public shaming. The sweetest, most absolute revenge is simply building a life so sturdy, so full of light, and so undeniable that their criticism, their lies, and their jealousy can no longer find a crack to seep through. They had called my award stupid. They had called my work a hobby, but standing here, in the glow of the Lantern District, I knew the truth. They were just shadows, and shadows cannot survive when you finally turn on the lights. Thank you so much for listening to the story of Savannah and her journey to find her own light. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening while driving, cooking, or maybe working on your own cardboard city? Please leave a comment below and share your thoughts on Savannah's decision. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to the channel Lily Revenge Stories. Give this video a like and smash that hype button so more people can hear this story. Your support means the world to us. See you in the next video.